Welcome to today's webinar, Make the Summer Count, Top 10 Projects to Increase Profitability, brought to you by LP Gas Magazine and our sponsor of the event, Adcast. Before we get started, I want to let you know that today's webinar will be recorded. You are currently in a listen-only mode. A recording of this webinar will be posted to lpgasmagazine.com/webinars and will also be emailed to you tomorrow. At this time, I'd like to acquaint you with the ways you can participate during today's presentation. Please notice the Q&A panel at the left-hand side of your console. If you have a question, type it in the panel's text box, then click Submit to place your question in queue. We encourage you to ask and enter any questions you may have for our speakers during the presentation. We will address these questions at the end of the presentation during the Q&A portion. Questions submitted during registration have already gone to our panelists and may be covered during the presentation. If you experience any technical difficulties during today's event, you may use the same Q&A panel on your screen to submit your issue, and I or technical support specialist Danielle Pesta will personally assist you. You may learn more about our speakers by viewing their photo, bio, and email address in the panel located on the upper left-hand side of your console. If you are logged into your social media accounts, you can share this webinar's title, description, and URL with your friends or colleagues using the Share This widget you'll see in the bottom left corner of the screen. Finally, at the bottom right of the console, you will find a PDF of the presentation slides, which you can download, and a link to visit the Adcast website. I'm Rory Harris, Content Marketing Producer for LP Gas Magazine, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Now, I'd like to introduce today's presenters. Today, we will be hearing from John Coyle, Vice President of Sales for Adcast. With over 20 years of sales, marketing, manufacturing, and product development experience, John has a passion for process efficiency, management, and customer satisfaction. Next, we will be hearing from Steve Gent, Account Manager for Adcast. Steve Gent has spent the last 8 years serving the petroleum sector, and he was in the payments industry from 2007 until 2018. At this time, I'll turn the presentation over to John. Take it away.
Well, very much, Rory. We're excited to be here to talk about, the summer and off season and things that clients can do to increase their profitability. It's really important to identify that in the slower times of year, whether it's your summer or your off season, the work you do now really sets you up for potentially massive gains in your busy season. So it's really important that we continue on.
Yeah, John, this has been a really great exercise in preparing for this. As I've basically been speaking to a bunch of customers, right, including down at the NPGA show a couple weeks ago. It's been a lot of fun developing a kind of, felt like more like best practices through stories. So I don't have all the topics covered, but it sure was enlightening on a number of them anyway.
Yeah. So today we have a very packed agenda. We're going to cover kind of the top 10 items that we've identified. And I think what's really important as we move forward is to recognize the day for tomorrow. And, in preparing for this webinar, Steve and I had a few conversations, and one that came to mind for me was I thought about early football players from the 20s and 30s with their leather helmets. And, when they played their season, they went right back to a regular job, after the championship game. And yet today's athletes, they train year-round. Okay, so Tom Brady won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. He may have took 2 weeks off, but he spends the other 50 weeks a year training to win the next Super Bowl. And in today's world, we must train 50 weeks a year to make sure we're ready. So we take the off season to do everything we can to get ready for that next delivery season.
Yeah, that's kind of a neat way to look at it. Some of the projects are brand new, but most of them are a constant work in progress. So it's a technique or process versus something that needs to be tweaked, right? But will help you to improve your game at the end of the day.
So first, let's begin with asset utilization.
Yeah, this started as hard assets, right? It was initially tanks and trucks and what are you doing with the hard assets, but then it quickly morphed into including employees, which makes all the sense in the world.
So when we look at tank utilization, which is one of those hard assets, one of the things that I'm reminded of often as I talk with propane marketers is that it costs on average about $75 to send a truck out just to touch a tank. And so it's really important that we maximize those deliveries as much as possible to ensure that every time we do touch a tank, we're having a profitable delivery.
Yeah, steel is more expensive than ever and hard to come by with the longer lead times, right? So repurposing tanks has become a focal point in the hard asset category. There's kind of two different directions we can go. One is that what you do with your steel, how big is your bucket? And so fill efficiency is obviously critical, especially when your tanks aren't lined up with the customer usage. But what I wanted to say is that some fuel marketers would hire my dad and have him drive around with a clipboard and record tank information, like serial number and the condition of the tank. But today's technology has totally transformed the entire category of asset management by utilizing tablets and electronic communications. We'll dig into this a little bit more later. One quick anecdote relative to hard assets is New England's a really small regional area with a lot of companies covering multiple states. And even in some states, tax rates for hard assets are taxed differently depending on county, right? So bottom line is it's a complicated formula to know where your assets are and what you should be paying for taxes in a particular county, much less in different states. With tablets recording serial numbers, you're getting the GPS, latitude, and longitude. We have someone that saved tens of thousands of dollars a year straight to the bottom line based on accurate tax reporting by county, right? The tablet records the exact lat and longe, so you know how to report that asset in a particular location.
I agree, Steve. That's some pretty significant numbers. And when we look, even deeper, it's about making sure we have the right tanks at the right location, the right size tanks at those locations. And there's a lot of tools that are available to us. Now when we look at trucks, we're saying, on average, it costs about $5 a mile has been a number that's been thrown out. And I got to say that's probably increased a lot over the last couple of weeks or months as we've seen the fuel prices increase. It just really takes a look at, how efficient are our trucks and drivers? How is our routing system?
It's one thing to have a mobile solution, but it's the next level where you start actually honing in on the zones and utilizing the software for the most efficient routes, then making sure the drivers are accountable or following those routes. I heard less than a month ago from one customer that he was delivering 60,000 gallons a day with 12 trucks. And after they focused on letting the software do the work and honing in on the zones, they were able to deliver the same number of gallons per day with 9 trucks. More on the specifics of that later, but holy cow, that is asset utilization. So just like the slide says, especially in today's environment, retaining employees is a challenge, right? Imagine maintaining your delivery standards, but being able to do it with 75% of the drivers. I was a little surprised by the number of companies who cross-train drivers to be technicians when I was doing these conversations over the last couple of weeks to hone in on this seminar. To find that the drivers being cross-trained as technicians, they were putting them to work and having them perform field maintenance, such as maintaining, painting, and evaluating tanks. And sometimes the best teams move players around because even somebody that can't do their primary job as well as they used to, they'll move an athlete to a different position because they're still better than the rookies.
Yeah, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into training a little bit later in the webinar. So our next asset is technology itself. And, we want to look at, are you on the latest release of your back office software? Often we find that clients aren't on the latest release, which means they're foregoing some technology that can help improve their business.
I can think of a couple significant productivity jumps. That's a hard word to get on a Monday. But the last couple of releases, a few years ago, it was about customer communications. And the latest was incorporating bulk tanks into the delivery optimization.
You know, we also want to consider what tools do we add to aid in efficiency. So you have to ask yourself, you know, are you leveraging mobile technology like mobile tablets or APIs for your website?
Yeah, more people are working from home at a moment's notice. This was answered by Ad System with our E360 browser-based platform. Are you getting the right kind of business intelligence reporting? And certainly don't forget security, right? We got to talk about security and software assets.
So let's focus a little deeper on the delivery side and look at how we increase delivery efficiency.
So earlier, we spoke about going from 12 trucks to 9 and maintaining over 60,000 gallons a day. And I want to touch a little bit about on how this is done. He had to stop thinking in terms of zones being town lines. Before, he might have an area, let's call it West Springfield, being the town that bordered East Nashville. And well, when you start to concentrate on the fill efficiency and where the truck is in a zone, that's kind of step one, to stop talking about lines and geographic lines and start looking at where the tanks are, where they need to be filled, and kind of create your zones. Then that same fuel marketer has migrated to also incorporating or integrating the bulk plants into route optimization. I've got a great cost-benefit analysis on that. What that means is that if a truck runs out of inventory 20 miles from the plant, that's a minimum of 40 minutes to fill up again after they've driven back to the plant and put fuel in the truck. Then if they have another 10 miles to go before they get to their first drop in the second half of the day there, well, you just added 20 more minutes. Conservatively, that's 60 minutes. So if your route start and stop closer to the plant, we're increasing the efficiency by at least conservatively, and let's take it from 60 down to 40, right? So if it was 40 minutes a day in savings by incorporating the bulk plant times 12 trucks, that's 8 hours of delivery time a day, and that's a free truck working on the roads every day. So I feel like understanding your play efficiency is the beginning of tweaking the process for improvement. And to start to manage the exceptions and let the software manage the rules, a lot of folks start with a good dashboard to see the playing field. Then they look at the exception reports to try and figure out how to tune up the process or to change the process during the off months. What you have here is a dashboard, an executive dashboard that will give you that baseline where you're at every day, day in and day out, and then you can start to manage the exceptions, not the rules.
So there's other areas where we see people looking to increase delivery efficiency is the implementation of a mobile solution. It streamlines communications with the office or the dispatch. It makes information available to the drivers, but also to all those in the office about what the drivers have been able to do. Mobile technology brings a real-time connection with your office and can also bring that same real-time connection out to your customers.
It's a big deal to implement a mobile solution, and it's disruptive to the process, but after everybody that we've deployed, one of the things that you hear over and again is that, you know, you can't take it away after you've had it. And the analogy that comes to mind is 5 years ago, I don't remember them having tablets on the sideline for football games. Can you imagine trying to take those tablets away from those coaching staffs now in an NFL game, and what they would do, or how they would try to operate the team without those real-time videos and real-time knowing what the assets are? And so that's my sports analogy, John.
We've taken our trucks and we're trying to make them and our drivers as efficient as possible. And now we need to, you know, dive down into the deliveries themselves. We want to make sure we're getting the most out of every delivery. And this is where we start to talk about business intelligence reporting, creating alerts that are running analysis against your actual data and sending you alerts, an automatic alert that says this driver's performance is out of normal. You know, we want to make sure we're looking at our drivers, but depending on the number of drivers you have, it can be a lot of data to churn through. Business intelligence reporting can give you a graphical view as well as the detail behind it, so we can drill into where things are going right and where things are going wrong.
Yeah, basically the right tanks at the right time of delivery, maximum amount of fuel dropped equals maximum profits. So what are we looking at here, John?
You know, here's an example of comparing a driver, multiple drivers, and then we've actually drilled down into one driver here, and working from the idea of if I can raise my lowest performing driver up, then I raise all of my drivers up, because what those lower guys are going to be able to have the biggest effect on the overall profitability. And there's a saying that goes, all boats rise with the tide. So if we focus our efforts not on our best drivers, but on our weakest drivers, help them become better drivers, we're going to see an overall improvement across the board in all drivers.
Sure. And this is, so you're like focusing on the low-hanging fruit, right? Managing the exception, those drivers that are not exactly efficient. I've had owners tell me that occasionally a driver can manufacture OT. Well, if you have a slow driver on a Friday and an efficient driver on that same day, and because of your technology, you know what the inventory is on a truck, you can re-optimize both and shift from the slow driver to the efficient driver, those deliveries, re-optimize both routes, and then save yourself OT, get the delivery done, reducing the cost and mileage and going back on another day.
Yeah, and then here on this slide, we're drilling down because we don't want to just look at the summary of the driver, but we want to look at some more of the detail. And here's an example. If we look at this one highlighted stop, we hit a 148% of ideal. Well, that really tells us, and we can look at the detail of the reporting here, this was a run out. And certainly a run out means that we made a very profitable delivery, but it also means we risked the customer. And so it's something that we don't want to have to do, because in the propane world, when we have a run out, it means our driver has to do more effort when he's making his delivery. He's got to make sure that that tank doesn't have a leak. Well, that takes more time and therefore costs us, some of our profit that we're looking to get. So drilling down into the material, we see some good and some bad based on what we're able to pull out of that data that's available to us. So now we want to talk about communicating with our customers. I'm a big believer that communication is key, and it's more important today than ever that we automate as much of this as possible, and so that we can get the message out to our customers. We can send notifications via text or email today through the systems, and that's allowed us to say, hey, we made a delivery. Everything is great. Here's your gallons. Here's your bill. But just as much as important is we want to let the customer know when things don't go well. If we couldn't make a delivery because the gate was locked, well, we want to get that message out to the customer right away. That means if they can get back to us and get that gate opened, we can have that driver make that delivery while he's still in the area. Otherwise, we have to drive back out to that area for one stop tomorrow. And that's going to be a loss of a productive stop, so it's going to cost us additional margin. So making sure that communications are in real time and happening with the customer both on a positive and a negative situation really helps engage with the customer, but also really helps to improve our profitability. And then the other side of that is not only can these communications can be event-driven, but they can also be on demand. It's summertime, so we don't much think about snow, but if there's a bad weather situation coming in, whether it be a hurricane or a snowstorm, we might want to reach out to our clients in advance and say, hey, there's weather coming in later in the week. We want to get out to your tanks now, so if we feel like we're coming a little bit early, don't worry about it. We're making sure we get this delivery done in case there's a challenge with it next week. And so, again, we can communicate with those customers in many different ways, but having good communication is also another key to profitability. So now let's take a look at our service department and how we can make those a little bit more profitable. I look at our service departments as profit centers. For some companies, and historically in the industry, some companies would see it as a loss leader, something that they had to do in order to offer the fuel side of the business and deliver their propane. But for me, it's really been a profit center. My personal story is my father, growing up, spent 40 years working for a company that was a mechanical services company. They did HVAC heating, and that's all they did. They didn't deliver any fuel products. They were just an air conditioning and heating company, a very profitable one, had over 140 drivers in North Jersey, and so from an early age, I knew that that side of the business was a profitable one. They certainly wouldn't have been in business and wouldn't be able to grow if they weren't making money. So when I meet with companies that are selling fuel and doing service, if they say that they can't make money in it, then they're just really making some mistakes. There's an opportunity in this industry to make good margin and good profit here while offering a service that really ties the customer to us and makes us a little bit stronger.
So earlier we spoke about how much technology has changed the game. While my dad is driving around for a fuel marketer, they're trying to keep paper process up to date, right? He's got his clipboard, he's got his serial numbers, he's writing everything down. We've completely digitized so much of the delivery and service side. Just had a customer sign up for gas check, and he didn't realize that the complete electronic records of the entire tank set gas check process was now incorporated into each customer. The serial number, the tank condition, the manufacturer delivery, nozzle condition, everything. And so we have everything in the electronic records at each location.
And those electronic records and having all that detail bring us to the ability to do really good service profitability analysis. We can create KPIs that are at our fingertips. These are reports that can get emailed to us on any frequency we want, whether it be once a week, daily, once a month. But having that information in the system allows us to make this a true profit center and no longer a loss leader. You know, I think when I look at customer service and I think about the service department, they really go hand in hand in here. And so service is really all about time management, and that leads us to great customer service.
I can't even tell you how many folks find relief in migrating from a shared Google Calendar or a paper calendar to a service scheduler. I mean, again, using the software, using the technology, being able to drag and drop one technician to another location. If somebody's running long at a particular location, you can see that that's occurring. You can communicate with the customer, and you can move another technician to fill that afternoon slot for the guy that's being held long at a location. Again, it's about increasing billable hours, which is done when you start to literally see where a tech is and scheduling the right person for the right task, and being able to have flexibility in that scheduling.
And so now that we've got the right people in the right place, we're working with the dispatch monitor. We're creating an efficient and effective communications with our techs, allowing the right tech at the right job. And with the increase in work from home, one of the areas that I also like to think about is more and more people are home when our techs are going out. And so it's really important that we know and let them know who's coming to the door. And so today, again, leveraging technology, we can send a text message with the picture of the technician that's coming to your house. And we can let the customer know that this technician is arriving on site in the next 20 minutes or the next 30 minutes, or he's en route to the next job.
Yeah, to me, this means customer communications. I mean, gone are the days of somebody will be there between 8 and 4, and unless, of course, you're a cable company. But it's also tightening up the billable hours, which helps you and the customer at the same time.
And when we talk bill, we're talking about flat rate is certainly an option that's available to delivery companies today. Flat rate is really nice because it lets your customer know what things will cost before the job gets done. It also means your technician can focus on the work instead of negotiating the bill after it's been done. And then mobile billing aids in accounting for all those parts that are used, because in a flat rate system with the mobile technology, we're able to record everything that's used on that, and that gives us tighter inventory control.
So this has got to be one of the more painful transitions for customers. But we have a customer that took the summer to tighten up the inventory, migrated the work orders to electronic tablets, started using the mobile product on the service side, and then found over $3 million in receivables that had been floating there around on paper for who knows how long.
Yeah, and I mentioned that good, tight inventory control. I get the opportunity to visit with a lot of clients around the country, and one of the things I love to do is to go on site and get a tour of their facilities. And I remember about 8 years ago, I visited with a client, and they took me into their parts warehouse. And when I say parts warehouse, I mean warehouse. This was huge, and they had a ton of stuff. And I knew that they did a lot of service work, but I started to ask questions as I looked at all this inventory. And, I particularly identified this one stack of blower motors, and I said, why do you have so many of these? Do you use this many? And the answer was, I got a really great deal on those blower motors. So they were on sale, and he bought a whole bunch. And I said, okay, well, when was that? He says, well, that was about 6 years ago. So he tied up his inventory dollars to keep them because he got a good deal, and he had them in the shelf. And I think what's important is we want to manage our inventory a little tighter than that. I think while it's great to get a great deal, if you're not turning your inventory on a regular basis, it's actually costing you more money. So using technology, we can look at what parts are being used and the rate of frequency of those usage. We can place appropriate purchase orders to have them in what I would call just-in-time inventory. But we also do need to balance that with what's going on in the real world. We've seen over the last couple of months that inventory lead times are taking longer than ever before because of what coming out of the pandemic. So I think we need to temper that, but as close as we can get to an acceptable inventory level without getting over bloated is really the goal in terms of managing our inventory in our service departments.
Yeah, the same customer that found all the receivables floating around started with about 30-plus pages of inventory, right? And he's got that best deal sitting there for years. And what he did is he said, he went to his techs and he got buy-in, right? He said, I want you to identify only the SKUs that you used in like the last year, the ones that you're actually working with. And then they were actively working with the techs. They reduced that list of SKUs down to under 10 pages. Turns out over 60% of the SKUs were wading through just tying up money, space, margin. And so this is the thing that we're saying is it took all summer to tighten up that inventory. It literally takes months, right? On the other end of the spectrum, we've got a company that's been through the transition, right? Now they manage inventory at the van level. And as the electronic interface to set reorder points is in the van, the level of attention has drastically reduced shrinkage and certainly improved the margin. On the driver's side of that equation, since they're using a tablet, it's much easier to build the work in real time. And then you got to remember, it's much easier to build the parts in real time and remember what parts you used last Friday, right? Not to mention that the back office is trying to decipher the notes on the paperwork orders is always a challenge for the back office.
So now let's talk about growing your customers. Summer is a great time to focus on growing your customer base. First thing you need to do is you need to have good, clear communication. In order to have good communication, you have to have up-to-date client records. So take the time to get your files updated. When you're updating your files and you're talking with customers, identify with them, get the correct email address, because sometimes email addresses change. Get a cell phone number. We used to just focus on a phone number, and maybe they've been a 20-year client. We've never recorded a cell phone number. If we want to be able to text that customer, we're going to need a cell phone. So taking the time to contact customers, talk about the offerings that the company has, but also updating the records sets us up to be able to have automated communications go out to them all year long.
Yeah, so during COVID, we certainly saw a rise in the tide utilizing our customer communication module. Now the efficiency looks like you can email the entire customer base about your service programs. One quick story is one of our trainers was on site and a CSR took a call about fuel assistance. And the CSR, gave the customer the information, but they gave it to him over the phone, and then they let the prospect go, right? They said, okay, here's the number you should call to get fuel assistance. Good luck. Thank you very much. So as soon as they hung up, our trainer, Jim, took a couple minutes, built an email template, and implemented a program or anyone that called about fuel assistance, the CSR went into like a collections mode, right? So what's your address? What's your email? What I'm going to do is I'm going to send out an email to you that has a link to that information that they otherwise would have given over the phone. So they started to build that customer base while assisting the customer with the fuel assistance information.
Yeah, that is a great story, and one that I'm sure will result in many more happy customers, because although we have to refer them sometimes to other people, to be able to make it as seamless as possible and make it easy for them is really important. And when we think about communication, the one thing that I always remember is, and I say it often, an informed customer is a happy customer. So the more we can do to inform our customers, keep them up to date, as much real-time information as possible, letting them know about their situation as well as the services we offer, it's only going to aid in ending up with happy customers.
Right. So part of this communicating proactively with customers, and I have a fuel marketer where about 40% of their business is will calls. And what we've done is we've just incorporated will calls into the projections, right? So that information, every time they make a drop, is incorporated, and we're taking those projections, and now when there's a delivery in a zone and they're popping up as due for delivery, the customer sends out an email saying, or a text basically, saying that you're due for a delivery, we're going to be in your neighborhood next Tuesday, would you like us to add you to the delivery schedule? And you'd be amazed at what the response rates have been.
So now we think about growing our customer base. We want to work with our entire team. One thing that was reminded to me, and this was on the sales side of it, is the sales department was out working to sell the delivery services for, standard heating delivery. And one of the things that they identified was they had a client who owned warehouses, and they had propane in the warehouse to heat the warehouse as well as the offices, and so they initially were focused on that tank. And one of the smarter sales guys identified, hey, this guy not only has this row of warehouse space, but he also owns several of these buildings. And they were able to leverage that customer and say, hey, when you rent your warehouse space, we'd like to offer a forklift cylinder exchange program for your customers. And so it was a way to take a look at an existing client and find a way to expand that existing client. And now they were able to really significantly grow their propane tank business, their cylinder tank business, by leveraging one client who now offers that as a service to all of his people that are renting from him. So as we look at it, cross-training drivers, making the most out of your sales team, getting your CSRs focused and offering all of your offerings as opposed to just answering the first question. These are all things you can do leveraging your team to help grow your customer base. I know a lot of clients that we work with attend local road shows as a way to get their brand name out and be connected to the community. But those strategic partnerships are also things that you should consider and look at as an effort to grow that customer base.
Yeah, so you mentioned team, and one of the things that self-service aspect and driving more people to the internet and to your customer portal has been like adding a team member to the team, right? So you have a CSR that's virtually there 24/7, 365, and so that's a way to leverage all your marketing and add to your team by letting your technology complement as a new team member.
Steve, self-service is no longer an option. It's a requirement for propane retailers today. And we've certainly worked with a lot of progressive companies that were early adopters of it, but unfortunately I see there's a lot of companies out there that still don't offer a web self-service to their customers. And that's a mistake in today's world.
Yeah, again, COVID just dramatically increased self-service, right? All of a sudden, offices were closed, so taking payments and ordering online saw a dramatic uptick. And I kind of thought it would slow down, but the number of folks were using that as a summer program They've been tightening up their emails. They've been tightening up their phone numbers for texting, and they've really kind of embraced the self-service options. And so I've seen, again, summer projects being about being in touch about marketing more to existing customers and having a self-service from everything from sign up from pre-buy to service, and then, of course, single payments online.
Yeah, so if you don't have self-service, if you don't have a client portal for your website, it's definitely something that we would highly recommend. But even if you do, you now want to take it to the next level. You want to say, what other services that I maybe didn't offer initially should I be expanding to? You know, and making sure that it integrates with your back office is really important, because the goal is to create self-service, which appeases your customers, makes your customers happy, gives you that ability to have a 24/7 CSR available to your customers. But if you don't have it integrated to your back office, well, then you're adding some additional manual work. When it integrates, that information and those changes and those order requests and those service order requests and those payments can flow automatically from your website directly in your back office without any human intervention. And that's really going to be able to give you that opportunity to maximize the efficiency of that piece of technology. You know, we recently covered some of this on a webinar with one of our partners that specializes in customer portals, which is Prime Media. That webinar, that podcast can be found on the Ad Systems website. It's part of our monthly blog, but we have our Adcast, which is a series of podcasts where we highlight, you know, different topics for the industry. So I'd refer anybody who's interested to learn more about what they can do with their web portal to that podcast. And now we're going to jump into our cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is real. Cyber threats are scary, and there's something that we really can't ignore.
Yeah, I can tell you that ads walks the walk, right? You guys have put me through quarterly training, and ads has made me constantly aware of personal and professional threats, and you know, it's everywhere, right? So we've really done a great job internally of teaching our staff and employees about the threat of cybersecurity. And there's a couple of stats on the board that say that ransomware rose by 105% in 2021. Since COVID, the FBI has reported a 300% increase in reported cyber crimes. And it's every 39 seconds. So now I get a text, and if I don't know who the text is from, or it's some high text that you don't recognize the number, I just delete. So it's good information, it's real, and I got to say that ads does walk the walk with cybersecurity.
Yeah, Steve, I think what's important for those of you who are attending today's webinar is to understand that big or small, we're all likely targets. And it's actually been identified that smaller companies are very attractive to what the FBI calls these bad actors, because they assume that you don't have the IT resources to be fully protected. And so, you know, it's really important that you do everything you can to work with your people to tighten up cybersecurity efforts. And I would say you need to make it a priority. You want to train your employees on what to look for. Now, there are companies out there that specialize in that type of training. Here at Ad Systems, we actually implore some of those as well. And I think there's an opportunity for every company out there to continue to do better. As Steve said, we put him through training. I do it myself. I've got several people that I manage, and we really take it seriously because we have to. And you don't have to be on your own. You can enlist teams at a very affordable price to help you. You want to make sure you're keeping your software up to date. You want to make sure that your firewalls and antiviruses are current and up to date. You want to leverage password policies across the company, and if necessary, and really it is necessary, and I would highly recommend, implement an MFA or multi-factor authentication. So for those who are not sure what that is, that's when I log into a particular website and I get a text message or a pop-up on my phone asking me to confirm that it's me. That's something that was not in place at the Colonial pipeline hack that happened last year, and had it been in place, they said that hack never would have happened. So again, a really important tool. I think it's also important to review your backup process. Many of you out there have a backup that you run every day, and that backup is, if something happens, you're going to restore to, that backup that's hopefully protected. But you need to test your backup process, and this is a personal story. So, back when I was a young CSR, fresh out of college, one of my daily tasks was to swap the backup tapes, and they were 10 tapes back then. And every day for the better part of a year, I did what I was told, and I swapped tapes. And one day my boss came to me and he said, "Hey, I deleted a file that I need. I need yesterday's backup tape to be able to pull that up." And I said, "No problem, here's the tape." It turns out we couldn't read the tapes. We don't know how long our tape drive was having a problem because we never tested our backups. So, I learned very on that, not only is it important to back up, but you want to test your backups and make sure that they're working. And if you're not sure how to do that, contact your service provider. Their hardware team will give you more information on how to be able to do that. But it's really important that we cover all sides of that. So now as we look and move a little bit forward, we want to talk about successful software upgrades. AdCast as a company puts over 500 enhancements into our system each year in our major upgrade. And then throughout the year, we'll have several minor upgrades or releases available to clients. When you do not take advantage of upgrading to that software, you're giving up on that enhancement in the software that ultimately was put in there to help make your life easier or to make your business more profitable.
Yeah, when it says take advantage of enhancements, we like to try to suggest that people stay a year or two out on upgrades. So every couple of years you should be upgrading. And what happens when you do that is you take a marginal amount of time and you're gaining significant improvements in the options that you're immediately able to take advantage of. Like customer communications was a couple of years ago. But if you let yourself slip 4 to 5 years, you're just exponentially increasing the number of hours that it's going to take to train and get up to speed on all those enhancements, whereas in the meantime, you would have had an ROI if you had it upgraded last year. And so you can get the ROI and take less time and make a marginal increase versus a more significant project. But I forgot. My sports analogy would be that it's a lot easier for a team for additional players to learn 20 to 25 plays, yet then to change a complete offense and try to learn 160 new plays, right? So especially if there are a couple plays in there that would have been producing points, it's just much easier to gain a marginal increase than it is a significant 160 play. How's that for an analogy? So successful upgrades are about good project management, right? And that really starts with setting one's expectations. And if you are on the same page, you kind of have the timeline, you have what happens with good project management is having a dedicated person on each side of the equation that are communicating, right? So that the project manager, a dedicated project lead is out there and they're communicating, and they align each schedules, and they align what work is the keystones and the timelines. And so if you are communicating both in person and via email, you find that project going a lot smoother. You also, when you have a dedicated person from both sides of the equation, you have somebody that is coordinating everybody's different schedules and kind of managing throughout the lifeline of implementing that project. And it just makes things a lot smoother if you have a dedicated person and a project lead.
Yeah, we have a great study on this. We did a blog a few months back on change management. It was really a webinar that's posted on our blog. So anybody who wants to learn more about what they can do to properly prepare for an upgrade, that change management webinar is a great resource. And again, I think as we look forward at, what do we need to do your due diligence, understand what you're getting in your upgrade, get the organizational buy-in. Change is hard, and there's going to be small changes and potentially big changes when you do an upgrade, depending on the last time that you did one. So make sure everybody is excited about that upgrade and talk about the benefits of it. Set realistic expectations of how long it's going to take to upgrade your system. Try to do everything you can to not overcomplicate it, but over-communicate it. You want to make sure you're delivering the messages across the board. And again, I can't stress enough how important that is, as Steve just said. Develop a timeline. And I think this one's important. Run a test upgrade. Do it in your test environment. Test. Make sure everything works exactly the way you expect it to, so that when you go live with that upgrade, everybody's comfortable, and then you can enjoy the wins. So next we're going to talk about adding technical resources or tech functionality. My suggestion here in terms of what tech to add to improve efficiency is look where you're doing the most things with the most manual effort. If your drivers are out there and they don't have a tablet, they don't have mobile software running in their trucks, that means they're doing manual effort, but you're also bringing tickets back to the office and people are doing manual effort there. You can reduce and remove almost all that manual effort when you add mobile to the delivery side of the business. The same can be said for the service solution. If you don't have mobile in the service side, you're doing a lot of manual paperwork, and our goal is to automate as much of that manual paperwork as possible to aid in efficiency, which is ultimately going to drive functionality. On the financial side, if you're doing a lot of spreadsheets in order to track the business or prepare for your forecasting, you want to look for business intelligence reporting using smart technology to remove the need for building these complicated spreadsheets so that they're there, they become actionable, and that you didn't have to spend time building it, you can go straight to reviewing it. And by reviewing it, you get to put actions in place that implement change more efficiently and faster.
So I've, whether it's mobile delivery or service or the projects that you mentioned there, it's everybody runs their company a little bit differently, but also we're all in the same business. So one of the things that I really try to strive to get customers to do and prospects to do is talk to their peers, right? So it's a pleasure to have one prospect or existing customer that's going to look into service or delivery talk to another customer that's already been through that process, right? So part of being informed is to consult with your peer group, and it's great to connect people, and what happens is you actually start to use these connections that transcend to the user groups, and which we'll touch base on in a minute, but that's a great way to learn how somebody else, what they experienced and how they implemented a certain, and pick up a couple tips on how somebody else is taking on a task.
So we've talked about our tanks, our trucks, our mobile efficiency, our service efficiency. So how do we choose what technology to add? Let's talk about our people again. And we hit this a little bit earlier, but I think it's really important. We want to talk about planning effective training programs for all of our employees.
Yeah, our best customers, the most profitable customers, reinvest in regular training. Every year they improve the utilization of the software, and believe it or not, every year you can improve on what you're doing. There's always something that moves the ball forward, kind of like how Brady gets out there and grinds away 50 weeks a year.
Yeah, I think, when I think about an implementation, I think about a couple of things. When we go on site and we're installing software, and this is really for anybody in the industry, the company that's absorbing all this new information is, to use a better term, drinking by the fire hose. You're being thrown a ton of information about all the technology and all the features of the system, and it's really hard to open your mouth and swallow it all. So some of it's going to splash on by. And so when I think about training, I think about ongoing training. something that really you have to commit to year over year and say, we're going to continue to get more out of this system that we invested by continuing to learn more from the experts. And those experts can be the company that you bought the software from, or they can be from peer groups that are also using that software, a user group. I think it's also important to identify that when we're learning something, we're learning from the person who taught us. And so we learn their good habits and their bad habits, but we only learn what they know. And so if I was in my position here and I was taught by somebody at Ad Systems all about our software, I learned from that person. But I may not know everything because they only know or only got so much information. They lost some of that information by the fire hose. So again, we want to take a look at training as an ongoing effort with all the clients. We want to make sure we're hitting all the key areas of our business and recognizing that, somebody may not have taught us everything about it. So therefore, we want to go back and, there's a saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I believe that that's not true. I believe if you take the training to your people, there's an opportunity to teach them a lot of new tricks, and that's ultimately going to give you more profitability because they're going to become more efficient employees.
I hope you weren't referring to me as the old dog. So on the people side of asset utilization, summertime means redeploying drivers so you can keep them on the payroll, right? That's been a critical aspect with, shrinking employees and trying to find drivers is to keep them busy, keep them on payroll. Gone are the days of laying them off and then rehiring them in the fall, right? I know a couple of customers who leverage FW Web as an example for partner training, right? FW Web will come to you and help you run certification programs. And that's just a great leveraging of a partner to bring in and retrain or cert employees, right? Then a second example is employee retention. Is we have a customer in Massachusetts that is a full-on push to cross-train drivers and techs. So if you have somebody on call for a weekend and you've cross-trained them, to a basic functional level, the driver is on call, goes out, makes a delivery. If there's an issue or a run out, then they can do a full-on gas check. They can close down the mobile software that's the driving side and open up the service side. And so they're incentivizing their employees, they're training their employees, cross-training their employees, and all of the employees are a broader base of functionality, which also helps when you're doing more with less, right? So if you have 9 drivers instead of 12 drivers, those assets become even more valuable. And so you have a better set of employees across the board.
Yeah, and I've worked with and managed hundreds of employees over my career, and I'm a big believer that all employees overall, for the most part, want to do a good job. They want to grow in their position. One of the ways that they can do that is continue to learn. They want to be able to take on new tasks. And so putting together an effective training program that's really going to run year-round, but certainly focused in your slower times where you can take on more of it, engages your employees and will give you happier employees in the long run because they feel like they're growing in their position, they're growing in their value to you as a company, and therefore they're going to be happier employers, and happier employees give you better jobs. They give us better results, and our customers can hear that. I swear, as a customer who makes lots of phone calls, I can hear when somebody smiles on the other end of that phone line, and that's the type of employees we want to have in your companies. So training them to be the best they can be will help aid you in that. So as we start to round out our top 10 list, one of the things we've got here is the expanding your useful network of resources. So there are a lot of resources available to you. Ad Systems, I mentioned earlier, a user group. We call them the AUG, the Ad User Group. That's a committee of ad users that comes together to talk about how to best use the software, but as well as other industry topics. And they benefit by being in a community where they can throw ideas and learn from one another to enhance their businesses. There's another group of committees out there, whether it be the MPGA, whether it be the WPGA, the Northeast Propane Show. At each of those industry events, you have the opportunity to go to conferences and educational seminars that are put on at those conferences. Another opportunity to learn more about how you can improve your business.
Yeah, and that customer that found the $3 million in receivables because they implemented the mobile program, I talked up the AUG at ads, right? The ads user group, and they also took advantage of the idea of the user group or your peers, right? So what happens is when your employees start to get involved with the software, is your company all of a sudden also has a voice in the direction of that software. So you're giving real-time feedback, and you're engaged, and you're learning from your peer group as to what's important to them, how they do things. So there's just a lot to learn from others who are doing what you do.
So with that, I'd like to say thank you to the LP Gas team for allowing us to be here. I'm going to throw it back to Aurora. I know some questions have come in, so we'll try to take as many of your questions as we can, and those we can't get to, we'll certainly follow up with you after the webinar.
Awesome. Thank you. That was really great stuff, guys. I'm going to go ahead and get started here with the first question we've received. And that is, are there ways to grow the customer base virtually as opposed to mailers or door knocking?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. So the first thing that comes to mind is obviously emails, right? But I have a more specific example that is knocking around in the back of my head, and that is that that customer that has a high percentage of will calls, right? So initially the will call was the person that, is just sitting on the sidelines and you're not engaging with. But after you've had a delivery or one delivery, and maybe more than one, if you start to leverage email and text communications on an outbound manner, what you're doing is you're migrating them away from being a one-time customer into being a regular customer, and you can keep communicating with them without door knockers and without doing the old, feet on the street thing to help increase your customer base and the regular delivery at somewhere that you're going to be next door anyway.
All right, great, thank you. And the next question we have here is, you talked a lot about mobile technology. I know it's expensive. Can it really make that much of a difference? I mean, my drivers know their routes really well.
That is probably a statement that is the first statement across the board if you don't have mobile technology in your delivery trucks. It is expensive. It takes a long time to kind of get all the pieces in order, because it's all based on your database and your zones, and then you work toward the real-time technology and the real-time ability to see what the inventory is, to re-optimize the routes, to reduce, and when you optimize a route, you're reducing the number of miles, which is reducing your expenses for each delivery, and when you're leveraging the software to give higher fill efficiency, you're taking somewhere that you may do 6 deliveries a year and you're bringing it down to 4 deliveries a year. So, but I guess the best anecdotal story I have is one of our very best customers, or my very best customers, swore to me for no less than 3 years that they could not see how they could be any more fuel efficient. And they were delivering 12,000 gallons a day. 60,000 gallons a day with the 12 trucks, right? And that customer that swore that automation, they didn't see how that would help them to improve, has the same number of gallons with, I don't know what the percentage is, but like a 30% less, and so they went from 12 to 9 trucks, right? So that the expenses involved with those miles, the expenses involved with the duplication, and certainly the rarity of having the drivers, right? You have those 9 drivers, it's easier than having the 12. Sorry, I went on there, but it does make a huge difference.
Fantastic. Thank you. And another question we have received here is, how best can one keep up with his customer base and ways to curb the market from competition?
So I'll grab that one, Steve. I think I said earlier in the presentation, communication with your customers is key. I'm kind of a believer that you almost can't over-communicate. You can. There's a fine line there. But a happy customer is an informed customer. And so you want to leverage all of the tools that are available to you. So that's a mailer. That's email. That's potentially text messaging. And when we look at messaging and communicating with customers, it's important to keep in the demographics of the type of customers that we get. And, you know, the younger generation that are newest homeowners, those are the type that like to get text messages, short, sweet, you know, updates on where things are at. Those that are a little bit older, we're moving into the email world. They prefer to get things traditionally via email, but we'll also start to accept some text today. And then you do have your older customers that, you know, prefer traditional mail. I think making sure you're communicating out to those customers across your entire customer base, and that's your customers that are on programs as well as your will call customers, because they're still customers, and anybody that you've delivered to in the last 18 months is a potential customer. So you want to find ways to market out to them, and you want to leverage all the available resources to you. So, again, that's mailing, that's text, that's email, and then personable. When you're at events such as a local road show or a county fair, or your drivers and your service techs are out, you know, they're talking with people and meeting with people, and that's another way to reach out to the competition. And everything that you do around that will help protect your customers from your competition.
Wonderful. And we're going to do one more question here. And that last question we have is, security has been a hot topic for our company. We are thinking of moving everything to the cloud. Is that safer than having a server in our office?
Yeah, that's a good question, one I get asked quite a bit. The answer is it may be safer, it may not be safer. You can create a successful, safe environment on your own server. The popularity of the cloud and moving things to the cloud has certainly risen over the last 5 years. And with the highlight on security, we've seen that increase as well, and people are looking at the cloud as a solution. One of the benefits of moving everything to the cloud is you're basically taking all of your security efforts, or the majority of them, and putting them onto somebody else. Now, there's a cost for that, so you've got to be able to weigh the costs versus the added benefit. But I would say that if you're doing the things you need to do internally with your own servers, you can be just as efficient as offloading that information to somebody who's offering a cloud service. If you don't have the ability to do that internally or to hire a local team that's going to be able to do it for you, then working with a cloud provider or your own back office software provider who may provide cloud services like AdSystems does, then that's another option, and that will give you that added level of security because you're working with a company that's providing security for not just their company, but for, in our case, hundreds of companies.
Thank you for sharing these insights with us today and for all the great answers to the questions. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up now. First, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. We appreciate your time. And now I'm going to go over a few closing remarks. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Make This Summer Count, Top 10 Projects to Increase Profitability, brought to you by LP Gas Magazine and our sponsor of the event, AdSystems. If you have any additional questions for myself or our speakers, you can reach out to us directly via the email addresses you see on the speaker console located on the left-hand side. The resources panel houses a PDF of the presentation slides, which you will be able to download. To access this panel, click the green icon at the far right end of the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. A recording of this webinar will be emailed to you tomorrow and posted to lpgasmagazine.com/webinars. Upcoming webinars from LP Gas Magazine also will be posted to that page. Thank you for attending, and we hope you'll join us for another great webinar.